Is the Nigerian economy on the brink of collapse? Hello, my name is Collie Brown. Welcome to Africa Business Channel TV. To answer that question, we need to look at some statistics. So we're going to talk about statistics from 1970 to 2021. Population in 1970, 56 million. GDP, 13 billion US dollars. In 2021, population 206 million, GDP $433 billion. Per capita GDP, which is the GDP divided by the population, in 1970 was $223. Adjusted for inflation over the years, it's at currently $2,000. In 2021, the actual GDP is $2,085. So in 50 years, the GDP has only grown by $85 in real terms. Exports. 70% of Nigeria's export is agriculture, textile, light industry, and 30% crude in 1970. In 2021, 30% of Nigeria's export consists of agriculture, textiles, light industry, and over 70% crude oil. People living in extreme poverty. In 2018, there were 87 million Nigerians living in extreme poverty. In 2021, that number sank a little bit to 70 million. In 2022, it's gone back up to 90 million. Inflation, current inflation is running at around 18.6%. Population growth, 5 to 6% annually. Economic growth, less than 2%. If you catch that, economic growth is less than 2%. Economic growth is not keeping up with population growth. So technically, every single year, Nigeria is getting poorer and poorer. There are more people, and economic growth is not keeping up. Oil. 50% of Nigeria's government revenue comes from oil. 90+% of its foreign exchange comes from oil. Real youth unemployment is above 50%. Current fuel subsidy. The government is currently subsidizing fuel consumption to the tune of $7 billion US dollars per year. They're trying to reduce that, by the way. Between 1960 and 2020, the Nigerian economy lost more than $2 trillion US dollars due to little investment in the Nigerian people or in the country's infrastructure. So, how did the Nigerian economy end up in such dire straits? To answer that, we need to do a little bit of history. So Nigeria was set up to fail. The colonial powers, when they created African countries, and Nigeria is no exception, when you have a small amount of colonial staff to run a country, in the case of Nigeria, 10 million, and a small 30,000 colonial staff, that is not going to be sufficient to run a country. So how did they put Nigeria together? They took multiple tribes, multiple ethnicities, multiple religions, and you cram them into a small country and call it Nigeria. In addition to that, and by the way, those ethnic groups create what we call natural tensions. In other words, those natural tensions comes from the different groups being put into one place, into a small geography. But the colonial powers use that to their advantage, because when you have natural friction in a population, it means that the tendency or the chance of them coming together to band together to oppose the colonial powers is reduced because of those natural tensions. But they didn't stop there. They get one step further. They typically would take one or two groups and say, hey, let's share power with you. Because as I said before, the small colonial staff is not sufficient to run the country, to administer the country. So they need a lot bigger staff. And they got that by offering to share power with a small select group of people. Now, when that happens and they control the resources of the country, if you are an individual and you are not part of that group and you want to acquire your version or your amount of the resource, by yourself you can't do it. So what is the natural inclination, or what is the natural congealing point? The natural coming together point. That's at tribal level. So tribes band together to try to get their portion of the natural resources. And what that means is that over time, if you look at the Nigerian identity, Nigeria has 4 distinct components of its identity. The first one is tribal. The second one is ethnic. The third one is religion. And the smallest and weakest of them is the national identity. Now, fast forward to 1960. Nigeria's got its independence. How does Nigeria choose leadership? Well, because of the natural friction points and because people had to band together in a tribal way or in a ethnic way, the criteria for choosing leadership had nothing or very little to do with whether or not the leadership had the vision, the ability to vocalize that vision, and the ability to marshal the people to achieve that vision or that goal. That is not how leadership was chosen. The bigger influence was whether or not someone or a leader belonged to your tribal group, belonged to your ethnic group, or belonged to your religion. So, with the Nigerian identity being so strong in a tribal way and in an ethnic way, it meant that the qualities of a good leader were not the highest and most important criteria for choosing leadership. In addition to that, Nigeria also had a number of years where they had military coups and military leaders. And frankly, in any country, military leaders, even if they come in with the best of intentions, rarely ever pan out to be good stewards of the country and can provide direct leadership. But there's something else that has caused a big problem why Nigeria is on the brink. And that is, oil was discovered in 1958. Exports started in 1960. Over the years, Nigeria sort of dabbled with the idea of creating a national refinery process where they refine crude. Nigeria has exported, for the last 60 years, raw crude and imported finished refined petroleum. The difference in price is significant. In other words, raw crude is significantly less expensive. So, had Nigeria invested in a proper refining process, the savings that it would have accumulated over the years, if it took 10% of that and put it in what we call a sovereign wealth fund. For those of you who do not know what a sovereign wealth fund is, a sovereign wealth fund is a fund formed by government. Usually the monies that go into it comes from resources like oil, natural gas if you're an exporter of natural gas. But you take a certain percentage of the income that comes from that and you put it in the sovereign wealth fund. And then that is invested overseas. Now, when you look at a country, for example, like Norway and Sweden, their sovereign wealth fund is worth hundreds of billions of dollars US. Their sovereign wealth fund is so big that a significant portion of the government can be run just by a percentage of the profits. Let me say that again. A significant portion of the government can be run just by a percentage of the profits. Now, Nigeria did not do that. And so therefore, Nigeria has no sovereign wealth fund to fall back on. All right. So we have that problem. Well, how do you solve Nigeria's problem? Nigeria has to change the way it chooses leaders. There's no getting around it. It has to change the way it chooses leadership. No more can Nigeria afford to pick a leader based on a tribal affiliation, ethnic affiliation, religious affiliation. That leader has to be picked based on their capability, their management capability, their vision, their ability to articulate that vision, their ability to marshal the people to achieve the goals of that vision. Had Nigeria been choosing leaders like that, Nigeria would have had the proper investments in petroleum refining, and those savings would have gone to the Nigerian to help build the Nigerian people and to put in a sovereign wealth fund. Will the Nigerian economy collapse? I don't think so, and I hope not. Because two things. One, let's talk about the Nigerian people. Some of the smartest, brightest, intelligent people on the face of the earth. When you meet Nigerians all over the world, they tend to be overachievers, especially when they're outside of the country. When no hindrance, there's nothing to stop them from achieving their goal. Nigeria has in its diaspora scientists, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and they also have a lot of money that can be brought back to the country to build the country. But for that to happen, Nigeria has to deal with its security problem. And let's talk about that. Any country, Nigeria is no exception, any country with youth unemployment northwards of 50% is going to have a security issue. When you have young people who have no prospects for a bright future, it is very easy for someone or a group to come to them and say, hey, here's some gun, let's go do damage and take your resources, extract your resources from the people. So to fix the crime problem, to fix the security problem, Nigeria has to fix its economic problem. You know, earlier I said in the statistics that the government subsidizes fuel to the tune of $7 billion. They're trying to reduce that, but to the tune of $7 billion. African governments across the board tend to subsidize consumption. And when you subsidize consumption, once you consume that $7 billion, it's gone. It has no way of generating any follow-up revenue. It's gone. What the government should actually be doing is subsidizing manufacturing, subsidizing production. That is what the government should be doing. And if the government were to take 1/7 of that money every single year and invest in power generation, the dividend created by the power generation in manufacturing terms, in increased business, would be more than enough to make up for the loss in subsidy, the $1 billion subsidy. Manufacturing would increase because a significant input in manufacturing is electricity. And when you have power generation, modern power generation that is cost effective, then that is going to naturally lead to more increase in manufacturing and production. That will also lead to better paying jobs. And instead of people relying on a subsidy, their better paying jobs will be sufficient for them to take care of their needs. So, leadership is a significant piece. But there's one more element that we need to talk about. When you ask Nigerians, what is the biggest problem? What is affecting the country the most? They say corruption. So let's talk about corruption a little bit. Because oftentimes when they refer to corruption, they're talking about the leadership, that small group at the top that they say are corrupt. Well, let me say this. That is true that corruption exists at the top, but corruption exists throughout the economy. If you meet a Nigerian who's going to send a car back home, one of the first things they tend to want to do is to talk to the family and friends to see if they have somebody in the Nigerian customs. And why are they asking that question? They're inquiring because they want to find that person and give that person a small amount of money to get their vehicle cleared fast, efficient, but also not at full cost. That is corruption. And that is not being generated by the government. That is being generated by the average Nigerian out there. If you go to an office to get a permit, for example, and you have to bribe somebody, you're also creating part of that problem that you say you're against, corruption. So if you give a policeman a bribe, that also is corrupting the nation. It is not just that small little group. Every one of us have to take that responsibility. It is the responsibility of each Nigerian. Now, knowing the Nigerian people, how kind and generous they are when you meet them, they can rise to the occasion. They can certainly more than rise to this occasion. In other words, the Nigerian population can and should and will refrain from taking actions that will continue to lead to a corrupted society. The Nigerian people with the right leadership will behave in a way that they do not make the problem that they're trying or complain about any worse. And finally, the leadership that will solve Nigeria's problem must respect the people. And the way it respects the people is it needs to understand that the government's revenue or the government's funds belong to the people of Nigeria. It does not belong to the leadership, irrespective of where you are in government. It does not belong to you, it belongs to the people. Nigeria needs a frugal leader, someone who understands government money does not belong to him or her. As plain and simple as that. Now, in the next year, Nigeria will be choosing a leader, and in subsequent years, for Nigeria to avoid a disaster, for Nigeria to avoid a collapsed society, Nigeria must change the way it chooses leaders. It must choose a leader not by tribe, not by ethnicity, not by religion. It must choose a leader based on capability demonstrated by the leader, the ability of the leader to vocalize it, and the leader must respect the people. Thank you for watching. Please like and share this video. It costs you nothing and it means a world to us. If you have not subscribed to this channel, we ask that you do so. That also will help us. If you've subscribed, please hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when we release new videos. We'd like to hear from you. Please use the comment section to tell us what you think about the show, to suggest show topics and other things that you might want to see. If you know of somebody who you'd like to see on the show, you can send us an email at africabusinesschannel@gmail.com. africabusinesschannel@gmail.com. Thank you for watching.